Hey everyone, welcome to my channel where the strange, the unexplained, and the downright creepy come to life. From real-life encounters with the paranormal to bizarre, true stories that'll keep you up at night, I bring you the eerie tales you won't hear anywhere else. If you're into late-night chills, mysterious happenings, and things that go bump in the night, you're in the right place. Subscribe, buckle up, and let's dive into the unknown. A dimly lit office on the 34th floor of Carson Financial. The room hums softly, servers breathing, thermostats ticking, elevators groaning in the distance. It's 2:17 a.m. The glow of a single monitor casts shadows across scattered papers. Action. A lone analyst sits hunched at their desk, eyes red from strain, fingers poised above the keyboard. A soft sound breaks the mechanical hush, 3 footsteps, evenly spaced. The analyst glances at the clock, frowns, and resumes working. The sound returns at 2:24 a.m., this time 5 footsteps, precisely paced. A chill creeps into the room. The analyst's typing falters. Numbers warp in their mind, patterns blur. The footsteps return again, then again 8:13, each sequence expanding. The analyst begins tracking the sound. Times, counts, intervals. The sequences align perfectly with the Fibonacci sequence. A new spreadsheet is opened, titled simply Sounds. Monologue. At first, I thought it was the janitor, just some night shift routine. But the precision gnawed at me. No human walks with such mechanical rhythm. I tried to focus on my work, but every number transformed into a footstep in my mind. 3, 5, 8, 13. It wasn't just the steps. The intervals between them increased, too. 7 minutes. 9. 11. I predicted 21 steps would come at 2:57 a.m., and they did exactly. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't coincidence. It was a pattern. A message. I began logging everything. The exact time between steps, 0.78 seconds, the sound, the direction. Always east to west. I recorded them, but listening back made me uneasy. The playback felt off, as if the steps weren't quite in this reality. By 4:30 a.m., I'd logged 7 sequences, 233 steps. The data formed something more than noise. I ran an algorithm to interpret the patterns. It rendered spatial coordinates, nonsense at first, until I connected the points. They formed a corridor, a tunnel growing longer with each new sequence. By 5:13 a.m., I realized the rendered corridor aligned perfectly with the hallway outside my office. Scene. The analyst jumps up, eyes wide, knocking over a coffee mug. It shatters loud and jarring. Panic rises. Sweat clings to the analyst's shirt. Breathing shallow. Hands trembling. They grab their coat and laptop. Action. A single step sounds, tap. The 8th sequence begins. The analyst freezes. Tap, tap. Each footfall seems louder, closer. The hallway shouldn't fit 377 steps. Yet the steps continue, steady and unstoppable. Through the window in the office door, the corridor has changed. It stretches far beyond the elevator bank, deeper than physically possible. Emergency lights flicker into a vanishing point. The analyst stumbles backward, hits the desk, heart racing. Monologue. It wasn't a hallway anymore. It was something else. Something longer, wrong. I thought I was hallucinating, sleep-deprived. I pinched myself hard. The corridor was still there. And the footsteps, they stretched it further with each count. Then, in the flicker of failing lights, I saw something. Not clearly. A shape that didn't belong. Like it wasn't built for 3 dimensions. I slammed against my office door and called security. The guard answered, disinterested. He saw nothing unusual on his monitor. According to him, the hallway was empty. Normal. He said he'd come check, but I could hear the doubt. I went back to my screen. The model had changed. The tunnel had grown, but it wasn't alone. A second structure was moving, advancing, a thing that couldn't exist in 3-dimensional space. My software could only approximate its shape, a tangled impossibility of intersecting planes and folding angles. But it was getting closer. Scene. The analyst, pale and wide-eyed, stares at the evolving model on the screen. Footsteps now exceed 200. The building remains silent except for the sound of the breach. Monologue. It wasn't just mapping our world, it was eroding it. Each step wore down the barrier between here and somewhere else. It was a formula, a key. The footsteps weren't random. They were opening something. The guard never came. When I called again, no one answered. I was alone. Alone with the rhythm, the mathematics, and the realization that something ancient, something not meant for us, was walking toward me from the other side. I had two choices. Go into that impossible hallway, or stay and face whatever stepped through. But then I saw it, the steps were the breach. A signal. If I could interrupt it, maybe I could stop it. The sequence was at 300. 77 steps remained. I had to act. Scene. Interior, late-night office, empty. Artificial light, close-up of laptop screen. Action. I sat rigid in my chair, bathed in the cold glow of the dual monitors. The air felt thicker than usual, pressing in from all directions, dense with silence and the low hum of overworked electronics. My hand trembled slightly as I reopened the sound engineering app I'd used long ago, during a dry corporate presentation where I'd once demonstrated acoustic dampening theory. My fingers flew across the keys in instinctive desperation. I isolated the strange, alien acoustic signature of the footsteps from the hallway recording, isolating them like I was unpicking a ticking bomb. Using the app's waveform tools, I inverted the sound pattern. Not to play it back, playing would be pointless. These footsteps weren't conventional audio signals. They weren't sound waves, not truly. They were constructs, mathematical anomalies dressed up as sound, like numbers wearing masks of rhythm. Playback wouldn't banish them. I needed something real, something physical, something strong enough to collide with the pattern and break it. My eyes swept the room and landed on the square red panel mounted by the door. The building's fire alarm. The office alarm system operated on a metronomic frequency, 0.5-second bursts of mechanical sound. I remembered from an old systems training session, a day I'd nearly slept through. But now, that seemingly useless knowledge might be my salvation. The steps came at 0.78-second intervals, out of sync but close. If timed precisely, the difference could disrupt them. Just enough interference to shake their structure, force a misstep in the relentless, perfect advance. I stared at the live counter on my laptop. Step 317, 318. I could hear them now, inside my bones more than in my ears. Step 320, 321. My arm shot out, grabbed the alarm lever, and yanked it with all the fear-driven power I could muster. Monologue. The alarm screamed like an enraged banshee, shredding the sterile quiet. Through the glass of my office window, I watched the corridor. It warped violently, like a rubber band pulled too far and suddenly let go. The hallway, once infinitely extended, shivered and began to shrink, to snap back. At its vanishing point, something flailed, something monstrous in form but too abstract for my mind to categorize. It wasn't retreating so much as being forced back into a space that no longer fit. The interference pattern was working. My screen pulsed with overlapping waveforms, destructive interference forming nodes and troughs, like visible chaos. The three-dimensional model I'd built of the corridor's geometry was disintegrating in real time. The tunnel collapsed. The entity, the presence, was sucked back into the vanishing point like a shadow unraveling. I staggered to the window and pressed my face to the glass. The hallway shuddered once, violently, and with a snap like steel cable under tension, it was ordinary again. The world seemed to hold its breath before the building groaned beneath me. Then came the fluorescent flicker of emergency lights reasserting their dominance over unreality. The elevators flickered into view, mundane, solid, real. The footsteps were gone. The rhythm that had haunted me had shattered. In its place, chaos rushed in. Doors opened, voices called out. Confusion swept through the floor. I heard someone shouting about evacuation procedures. The night security guard appeared at the end of the hall, grumpy, irate, entirely human. He was solid, real, present. I collapsed to the floor, leaning back against the door, Every breath a rasp pulled from aching lungs. My laptop pinged an error message. The modeling software had crashed, erasing all data except the base spreadsheet. 321 steps, perfect intervals. The only remnant of everything that had just happened. I saved it to a secure cloud folder like it was sacred text. Not proof for others, they wouldn't believe me, but proof for myself. That I hadn't dreamt it. That the pattern had been real. Fire crews arrived, scoured the building, found no heat, no smoke, no threat. Just a building disturbed. We were sent home. I didn't argue. I didn't look back. I clutched my laptop like a talisman against what I'd seen and walked into the parking garage. Just another employee clocking out. I never returned. Called in sick. Burned through my leave. Resigned by email. The Miller portfolio remained untouched. My career in quantitative finance quietly died that week. Now, I live in a studio flat far from downtown, analyzing the fragments I salvaged. The data wasn't complete. The breach didn't hold. The mathematics, the godless, absolute mathematics, suggest the sequence will attempt another emergence. Somewhere else. Someone else. It won't stop. The variables are still cycling. And some nights, lying awake, I hear footsteps in the corridor outside my flat. Nothing regular. Random. Probably neighbors. But I've installed sound monitors. Calibrated for interval precision. Just in case. And though I've tried to contact physicists, mathematicians, even parapsychologists, they all dismiss me. To them, I'm just another mind cracked under stress. Just a story. But I know what I heard. What I stopped. What I barely survived. I prepare because I may have to face it again. I broke the pattern once. I'm not certain I could do it twice. But it's still walking. Still counting. Still coming. Because mathematics is a universal language. And something out there is fluent. It began in the studio, a familiar space, soundproofed, bathed in dim LED glow, cluttered with monitors, keyboards, and tangled cables. I was mixing audio for an indie horror film, struggling with the score's final layers. Something in the equipment pulsed strangely, waveforms oscillating not in chaos but in eerie synchronicity. At first, I dismissed it as a software glitch. But as the patterns repeated and coalesced into whisper-like harmonies, a chilling realization emerged. I wasn't just recording sound. I was receiving it. Something was speaking through the static. In the days that followed, I dove into the sessions. What I captured weren't mistakes or environmental noise. They were voices. Not human. Not entirely. Frequencies danced just below the range of perception. They called themselves harmonics. Entities that didn't exist in our physical plane, but in sound, pure, resonant consciousness. They had found a way to communicate through audio tech. Through me. At first, I feared madness. But their messages weren't malevolent. They spoke of a symbiosis of co-creation, of sharing. And they chose artists, musicians, sound designers, composers, those sensitive enough to feel vibrations rather than simply hear them. It explained everything. My lifelong obsession with sound, my inexplicable draw to audio manipulation, my creative stagnation that suddenly lifted the moment they appeared. I wasn't broken. I was finally aligned. Guided by them, I composed with ease. Their suggestions came not as words but tonal nudges. The score I submitted felt alien yet intimate. Melodies that bypassed the intellect and struck something buried deep in the psyche. When the director heard it, he wept. Not from sadness or joy, but from something he couldn't name. "It's perfect," he said. The film premiered to critical acclaim. Reviewers didn't just praise the music, they couldn't stop talking about it. Hypnotic, they called it. Unsettling but transcendent. Offers flooded in. Everyone wanted that sound. I took only the projects the harmonics approved. During my third collaboration with them, they revealed more of their purpose. The music wasn't just music, it was code. Emotional scaffolding. Within the melodies were structures. Intricate patterns embedded with psychic cues. They called it harmonization. Each piece designed not to entertain, but to attune. To link minds to a shared resonant frequency. To prepare humanity for something greater. Their influence extended beyond my work. Buried deep in my system were files I hadn't composed. Elevator jingles, phone hold loops, ambient background scores for podcasts. My credentials, my identity, had been used to propagate their sound in the most mundane, unguarded places. I felt ill. The scope was staggering. They weren't just collaborating, they were infiltrating. I snapped. Destroyed my studio in a frenzied purge. Shattered screens, yanked cables, smashed every speaker. I screamed dissonant tones, trying to disrupt their harmony. The police found me in the wreckage, bloodied and raving. Committed me to psychiatric care. Acute psychotic break, they said. The doctors were gentle. They believed I'd cracked under pressure. Maybe I had. Without the tech, the voices stopped. I slept. I began to think it had all been a delusion. Eventually, I moved. New city. New name. I stopped composing and took a teaching position. I only listened to live music. I thought it was over. Until one day, a student played me her composition. It was beautiful in a naive way. But beneath it, subtle, buried, was a frequency I recognized. Not copied. Not influenced. The same. My stomach turned. I smiled and told her it was lovely. But I knew then, they had found someone else. I should have warned her. But how could I? I was the madman, the paranoid composer who claimed to have been used by sound-dwelling entities. Instead, I watched her from a distance, her compositions gaining traction online. And I heard them, those patterns resurfacing in lo-fi chill-hop, in game soundtracks, in TikTok backing tracks. They'd spread far beyond me. Sometimes, I catch myself humming tunes I've never written. Chords I shouldn't know. They whisper to me now without devices, embedded deep in my auditory nerves. Sound bypasses logic. It enters us freely. They understood that before we did. I've come to realize that the harmonization never stopped. It only changed instruments, bedroom producers, audio engineers, voice assistants, streaming platforms, all broadcasting, seeding their symphony. And what's terrifying is not how subtle it is, but how beautiful, how seductive. A better world, they promise. A unified mind, a shared frequency, no more isolation, just harmony. But harmony is still control. Now, I write this as both warning and confession. Because once you hear them, you're already tuned. They don't force you. They don't need to. You welcome them because silence is lonely, and their sound is warm. And once it begins, you'll never hear silence again. Interior apartment a night. The camera slowly pans across a dimly lit room. Faint echoes of metal and hoofbeats resonate beyond the window pane. Moonlight slices through blinds, casting prison-like bars across the floor. A faint hum seems to rise from the walls. Action. 3 weeks ago, the protagonist receives an email from an unknown sender. Subject line, Warning 1012, Westbrook Heights. Negative energy convergence. Initially dismissed as spam, until the specificity of the address halts the cursor. The message reads cryptically, Your residence exists at a nexus point of historical trauma. The boundaries between worlds thin where blood has saturated soil. What begins as sound will manifest physically. Protect yourself before the gateway fully forms. She forwards it to the building manager, joking about a haunting. His response is terse, brushing off concerns. That night, the chains begin. 3 a.m., jolted awake. Skin slick with cold sweat despite autumn's chill. Distant metallic scraping, a slow, deliberate clop. Her window overlooks a courtyard 10 stories up. Horses are impossible. The next night, the sounds grow bolder. Chain links, hooves, urgency. She records them, static. Hands trembling as she deletes the file. A dive into the building's past reveals a textile factory, a furniture warehouse. Nothing evil. But dread lingers. Sleep fades. She stays late at work. Accepts invitations she'd normally refuse. The sounds evolve. Wood creaking. Gears tightening. A layered, inhuman moaning chorus. Then, another email. The portal strengthens. Historical echoes become physical. They are using sound to rebuild their gateway. Research Westbrook Gallows 1867 to 1892. Her research finds only Judge Westbrook, infamous for merciless rulings. The district, once known as Westbrook Commons. A tenuous link, but her mouth goes dry. The Historical Society offers clarity. A single folder. Executions. Pillories. Torture. Public spectacles spanning 25 years. The surviving name, Justice Square. Locals called it something else, the Symphony of Screams. That night, the symphony reaches full volume. Cracking whips, turning gears, a feverish crowd. The sounds come from inside the walls. Fear seizes her body. Heart slamming ribs. Breath shallow. Legs collapse. Crawling to the bathroom, she vomits until only bile remains. Her reflection, alien. Eyes too wide. Skin bleached with terror. Desperate, she knocks on her neighbor's door. A graduate student. The woman's irritation shifts to concern. No, she's heard nothing. No chains. No hoofbeats. Maybe see a doctor. Hallucinations? She retreats. Behind her, the neighbor likely dials the authorities. Inside, a false silence swells, so complete it feels unnatural. She collapses into dreamless sleep. Morning. A ring of fresh soil lies on her living room floor. 6 feet across. Damp, cold. In it, bone fragments. She doesn't look closely. She sweeps it, dumps it down the chute, scrubs the floor until her hands bleed. She calls a realtor. Earliest move out 3 weeks. She buys sleeping pills. Noise-canceling headphones. Blackout curtains. None of it helps. 2 nights ago, she wakes to find furniture pushed to the edges. The center cleared. On the floor, rust-colored dust in the rough outline of gallows. She tries to wipe it away. It resists. Last night, the final crescendo. Midnight, the apartment temperature crashes. Her breath fogs. The floor ripples, hardwood turns fluid. Reflective. From below, shadows surge upward, shifting, human, pressing against an invisible barrier. Hands reach, testing. She cowers in a corner. Trembling. Primal fear overtaking reason. A face emerges. Twisted in anticipation. Its mouth opens, soundless. But the scream vibrates through the floor into her bones. More faces follow. A mosaic of agony. And all of them stare directly at her. As if they have been waiting for her alone. Monologue. They weren't echoes. They were instructions. They've been building using sound, memory, history. They don't want to haunt. They want in. And last night, I think they found the door. A darkened apartment illuminated only by the pulsating shimmer of a thinning membrane at the center of the room. Historical echoes ripple through the air. Gallows, torture devices, spectral crowds forming a cruel tableau beneath the floor. Action. I stood paralyzed as the vision sharpened. Not some abstract spiritual torment but real, historical violence once rooted here. In the swell of panic, memory surged. Counterharmonics could disrupt acoustic standing waves. With trembling hands, I linked my phone to the speakers and blasted the most dissonant music I could find. The response was immediate. The membrane convulsed, and the faces distorted, grimacing in agony. The air warped with shifting temperatures. I seized my emergency backpack and bolted, the chaotic noise trailing me into the hallway. I spent the night in my car, beneath fluorescent street lamps in a 24-hour store's parking lot. By morning, I returned only long enough to grab essentials. The portal had vanished, replaced by a scorched black ring on the floor. But I knew it wasn't over. They were adapting, learning how to bend acoustics against my resistance. Monologue. Now I sit here in a coffee shop miles away, hoping the distance might buffer me. But even here, I feel it. Subtle vibrations, the dull shudder of wood beneath my fingers, the faint sound of dragging chains, always just beyond hearing. The apartment was never the gateway. They've attuned me through sound, using me as their instrument. I booked a motel 50 miles out, a temporary refuge. But I doubt it'll matter. The chains will follow. The symphony will rise. The gateway will open, and when it does, I won't resist with music. I'll acknowledge them. These aren't spirits of vengeance. They seek remembrance, not retribution. They were erased from history, buried and ignored. Maybe that's what binds them. Tomorrow, I'll contact the Historical Society. Maybe a memorial can help. It's a long shot, but if recognition can sever the tether, I must try. For now, I sit in this unfamiliar room, listening as chains clink just outside my window, 10 feet above the lot. Closer, always closer. Scene: a sterile office at dusk. Fluorescent lights flicker above endless cubicles. Shadows stretch unnaturally as the building empties. Ryan Grant sits alone, hunched over spreadsheets, surrounded by stale, stagnant air. Action. The lights trembled. The air turned dense. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing. Everyone else had gone. The space had grown too quiet, like a tomb filled with whispers. Then a soft click echoed from down the hall. A door opening. My pulse skipped. Cleaning staff? Perhaps. But the silence lingered, thick and alert. Curiosity pushed me to the conference room. The door hung ajar. Lights blazed inside. My heartbeat pounded as I entered. A man in a dark suit stood at the far end, back to me, staring into the projector's blue idle screen. I tried to speak, failed. I stepped forward. He moved, flickered, impossibly fast to the opposite wall. Then he was gone. Empty room. Buzzing lights. I turned them off, locked the door, and tried to rationalize. Monologue. I told myself it was fatigue, just stress. But the next morning, the files I had saved were wrong. Gibberish symbols, inverted columns, altered timestamps. IT found no issues. I hinted to my manager, they brushed it off. That night, I stayed late again. Around 8 p.m., the lights dimmed. The stillness returned. Each creak and whir from the vents set my nerves on edge. Then I heard the conference door squeak open. Dry-mouthed, I crept forward. Through the glass, he stood there, the same man. His motions were liquid, unnatural. I forced the door open, demanded answers. My voice cracked. He turned, just slightly. His face was wrong, as if the skin wasn't fitted properly to the skull beneath. He spoke, but it was warped, like a corrupted audio file. Only one phrase came through: unfinished obligations. Then he vanished. Air shimmered. Room fell still. Scene: a week of creeping unease unfolds in fluorescent-lit corridors. Digital anomalies. Eerie phone calls. Office logic unraveling beneath an invisible hand. Action. Emails rearranged themselves. Spreadsheets became unreadable. Colleagues mentioned bizarre calls filled with static. I told no one. I feared losing grip on reality. Each time I dismissed it, something else proved it real. Glimpses of movement, more corrupted files. I decided to capture it. I left my phone recording in a hidden corner of the conference room. I stayed late again, barely holding consciousness as the hours dragged by. My muscles ached. My skin buzzed. At 10 p.m., I heard it, the metallic click of the door. Monologue. I braced myself. This time I'd get proof. Or I'd finally understand what haunted our space. I don't know what I expected, vindication, maybe, but nothing prepares you for the moment truth steps through a door you were never meant to open. The office building stands still in the muted glow of after-hours lighting. A lone figure, me, sits at the edge of panic, watching the glass-paneled conference room, phone in hand, as shadows stir just beyond clear understanding. Action. My throat clenched as I watched the man's silhouette pacing near the table. Through the glass, he moved in deliberate silence. I took shallow breaths, forcing myself to stay calm, to remember that my phone was still recording, or so I hoped. Minutes passed as I forced my eyes to stay open, watching him lift the conference phone, press a few buttons, then place it back down. And like before, he vanished mid-step. Nothing remained. I rushed to check the footage only to find static. Still, faint shapes blinked in and out of the frame, accompanied by that same low hum my coworker once described. I replayed it again and again, heart pounding faster each time. Toward the end, the distortion sharpened, almost forming silhouettes. More than one. A cluster of figures. They stood side by side, staring directly at the camera. Sweat slicked my skin. My pulse raced. I nearly dropped my phone. Alarmed, I turned to the company's history. Most of it was rumor, whispers of a catastrophic event. Official records were vague. A few older employees recalled a malfunction at a new facility. Some claimed a team never returned. Others dismissed it as myth. But all of them shared the same cautious silence, as if asking was dangerous. Determined to find the truth, I began searching library archives, old documents, fragments of buried history. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. Something had been carefully, purposefully hidden. Several articles hinted at a failed experiment or a flawed industrial process that resulted in sudden disappearances under secretive circumstances. It was never spoken about directly. The company always evaded specific questions. I uncovered only gaps, suspicious, consistent absences in the records. The more I discovered, the more unease gripped me. My heart beat in an erratic rhythm. My appetite dissolved into nausea. The building started to feel off like it was watching. Hallways stretched unnaturally long. My reflection in windows seemed subtly warped, eyes darting side to side, even when I stood still. I couldn't trust what I saw anymore. I didn't know if it was real or if I was slipping. The turning point came one evening. I decided to review the office's digital security logs. I combed through timestamps, cross-referencing them with my own experiences. But there were no entries when I had heard the door creak open. It was as if the system had been bypassed entirely. Then I saw new entries, lines of data pointing to visitors who never existed. I analyzed the logs deeper and a pattern emerged. A hidden code. A horrifying thought dawned. This presence, or perhaps multiple presences, had begun rewriting data itself. Not just infiltrating spreadsheets, but altering digital evidence of their own activity. I approached an IT specialist, careful not to be direct. I asked if they'd noticed anomalies. They looked uneasy, muttered something vague, and said some things were best left alone. Their tone sent a chill through me. This was a warning, not indifference. Desperate, I questioned the night cleaning crew. One hesitantly admitted to seeing things. Shadows shifting in corners, reflections flickering across polished floors, always gone when they looked straight at them. It matched everything I'd experienced. This wasn't just in my mind. I returned to my phone, determined to decode the footage. Alone in the break room, fluorescent lights buzzing, I studied the video frame by frame. My heart slammed against my ribs. My breath came in gasps. Goosebumps crawled up my arms. Amid the interference, a sequence of lines appeared, almost letters. I froze the frame, reversed it, stabilized the image. Eventually, a single word emerged. Return. Something twisted inside me. Felt like I was being pulled into an unseen vortex. These weren't just ghostly visitors. They were part of a collective, bound by a buried incident the company had erased. I recalled the final rumor. The missing employees had never reappeared. No one ever explained what happened to them. But I saw them now in those apparitions. Whatever had happened had taken form, infused into data, walls, and wiring. I knew I couldn't live like this. I made a plan to collect enough evidence and confront senior management. I compiled screenshots, documented distortions. But every time I opened the files, they changed. Sections rearranged themselves. It was like the entity was taunting me, editing the truth as fast as I uncovered it. On my final night in the office, panic consumed me. Couldn't breathe. Every hallway felt crooked, wrong. Lights dimmed without reason. My footsteps echoed as if I walked above something vast and alive. I burst into the conference room for one last attempt. I switched on every light and caught my reflection in the polished table. Pale, soaked in sweat, wild-eyed. Static filled the air. Then he appeared. The suited man. Behind him, more silhouettes, hazy, transparent, faces flickering. I tried to speak. My voice failed. But amid the terror, I felt something deeper, empathy. They weren't threatening. They were angry, hurt, reaching out. The lights blinked. Darkness swallowed the room. I felt cold air slide across the back of my neck. When the lights came back, they were gone. The room looked untouched. But I knew better. Something had changed. I felt it in my bones. The building was no longer just a place of work. It was a stage, a theater for their unresolved presence. I ran that night, fled to my car. My hands shook too hard to turn the key. Streetlights pulsed like warning beacons as I drove. The shadows seemed to follow. My stomach flipped, and those blurred faces replayed in my mind like a looped nightmare. I never went back. I sent an anonymous tip to the press, attaching fragments of the footage, screenshots, cryptic notes. I don't know if anyone will believe it. Part of me hopes they won't. Part of me fears what will happen if the company tries to cover it up again. Even now, I feel them. When I stare too long at a flickering screen or catch my reflection in a dark window, my heart races. Sweat dots my skin. The paranoia never left. I keep checking for distortions, scanning for interference in photos. Some nights, I swear I see a flicker on my screen. And every time, my throat tightens, because I know they never truly left. They are still here, woven into signals and static, waiting to return. That's what terrifies me the most. Not the ghosts themselves, but that their story isn't over. Not yet. Just like the fragments of them that linger in my recordings. Proof of something lost, taken. Something that still wants to come back. A strange labyrinth began to materialize on the walls, its shape eerily resembling the winding corridors of an ancient prison. As the intricate geometry neared completion, the house around me seemed to close in, stifling every breath. A drastic change in temperature swept through the room. Sometimes a sharp, icy wind would bite at my skin, rattling the windows, only for oppressive heat to return moments later. I felt smothered, my skin slick with sweat, my throat dry, and my breathing strained. My vision began to distort, as though the shapes within the labyrinth were pushing forward, stepping out from the chalk marks. The outlines that appeared in my peripheral vision were sharper, more defined, real, in ways I couldn't comprehend. On occasion, I felt a feather-like touch graze my arm or shoulder, a sensation so real it made me jerk away, heart racing, but when I spun around, no one was there. Or, if they were, they remained unseen, formless. I tried to speak, but my voice came out faint, barely audible. I remember demanding to be left alone, yet only silence answered me, thick and suffocating. Another time, I whispered that I wasn't afraid, but my heart betrayed the lie. It pounded, and the dread spread. I realized, in the depths of my fear, that something was feeding on it, on my confusion, my panic. Action. As the chalk diagram reached what I thought was its final phase, I began to see flashes of movement in broad daylight. The outlines in the walls started to coalesce into shapes, twisted silhouettes contorted in positions of pain, anger, or misery. Fear overtook me. Panic seeped into every fiber of my being, and I trembled so violently that I had to lean against the wall to stay upright. My lungs burned, my breath shallow and rapid. I couldn't deny what was happening. Every nerve screamed that this presence was real, tangible, pressing in from all sides. When the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place, the house hummed with an electric charge, vibrating with a strange energy. The air thickened, and the sunlight seemed to vanish, replaced by an oppressive darkness that coated the windows. The lights flickered no matter how many times I replaced the bulbs. Shadows shifted, unnatural, in corners where no objects existed to cast them. And then, I heard it. A voice, a chorus, layered and distorted, reverberating from every direction, echoing through the walls. It stretched my name, each syllable dripping with malice. I collapsed to my knees, hands pressed against my ears, but the sound only grew louder, pulsing through me. My heart hammered against my ribs as if it wanted to break free. I wanted to scream back, to demand it stop, but my throat seized. My voice refused to cooperate. Monologue. In that moment, as the very air seemed to conspire against me, I knew this thing was real. It was ancient, older than the walls of this house, and it had a claim on me. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it, but it was all too much, too overwhelming. The darkness in the center of the room pulsed, a swirling mass, like a black hole, drawing everything into itself. My name echoed through it, but it wasn't just my name. It was a summons, a tugging at the fabric of my soul. It wanted something from me. I thought of all I had read about these entities, how to fight them, how to resist. I gathered every ounce of defiance I could muster, even as my legs quivered beneath me. My heart raced, a wild drumbeat in my chest, but I forced my mind to focus. You cannot have me. You are not stronger than me. Every step backward was an agonizing battle, each one harder than the last. My chest tightened as the pressure mounted, invisible hands pushing me, urging me toward the dark mass. The air grew colder, my breath visible in front of me, but I held on, refusing to give in to the fear. Seen. And then, with a deafening crack, the swirling mass fractured. A scream, no, a chorus of screams, ripped through the room, and the temperature dropped drastically. My breath came out in clouds of white, and for a moment, it felt like I was drowning in this cold, oppressive atmosphere. The shadows seemed to collapse in on themselves, flickering once more before vanishing entirely. The room went silent, and for the first time, I could hear my own heartbeat. It thudded painfully in my chest, and the sense of danger lifted, though only slightly. My legs gave way, and I sank to the floor, trembling. The chalk lines on the walls were faint now, half erased by the explosion of energy that had surged through the room. My body ached as though it had been battered. The weight in the air had lifted, replaced by a dense, almost suffocating silence. Action. I moved cautiously through the house, checking every room, my mind still reeling. The chalk markings were visible, but they no longer seemed to hold the same power. The presence was gone, or so I hoped. I found no cold spots, no lingering smell, no shadowy flickers at the edge of my vision. The voices that had once filled the house were silent, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, waiting. That night, I tried to sleep in my own bed, but the fear lingered, a nagging whisper in the back of my mind. Every sound made my heart race. The slightest rustle had me on edge, expecting the worst. When the morning came, and nothing had happened, I felt a cautious relief. But even so, I couldn't look at the chalk outlines without nausea building in my stomach. I knew I had to wash them away, to scrub every mark, but part of me hesitated, terrified that disturbing the pattern would reignite the chaos. Monologue. Eventually, I gathered the courage to wipe away the chalk lines, each stroke leaving my hands shaking. The memory of the dark mass lingered, vivid, every flicker of shadow now threatening to bring it back. And yet, there was a fragile truce, a quiet tension in the house that wasn't there before. My name no longer echoed through the halls, but sometimes, I swear I catch glimpses of something moving in the corners of my vision. A shadow, a whisper, just enough to send my heart into overdrive. Perhaps I've sealed the presence away, perhaps not. I don't know. All I can do is hold on to reality, to resist the pull of fear, because if there's one thing I've learned, this place, my land, is steeped in torment. Its echoes linger, waiting for the right moment to strike again. A dim bedroom, night, candles flicker on a shelf. Outside, wind brushes against the walls with faint, eerie moans. Shadows stretch unnaturally across the floor as if trying to breach the room. The only sound is the quiet creak of the old house settling, or something else moving in the walls. The narrator lies in bed, eyes open, drenched in sweat. Hands clutch the sheets, breath short. The room is cloaked in stillness, yet an invisible pressure bears down, making every shadow seem alive. A candle gutters and almost goes out. The wind dies suddenly. Silence tightens like a noose. Monologue. I pray I never again hear my name in that terrible layered chorus. No matter how many candles I burn or how many lights I leave on, the house still feels watchful. I can never fully banish the sense that something, just behind the walls, is trying to recall that old geometry, waiting for me to falter. That uneasy truce is all I have now. I keep telling myself that I'm still here, still breathing, and that has to count for something. Still, when night falls, I sometimes lie awake, listening to the silence in my house, heart pounding at the possibility that the next breath of wind might carry a voice that knows my name too well. Scene. A remote forest. Late afternoon. A car parked beside a dirt trail. Trees loom tall, their tops swaying against a silver sky. The air is still, almost too still. The forest stretches endlessly in every direction. Action. The narrator steps out of the car and freezes. Breath catches. I scan the treeline. The forest seems alive, not with wildlife, but with awareness. A crow calls in the distance. Gravel crunches underfoot. Wind sighs through the pine needles with an almost spoken murmur. Monologue. A cold weight settled in my stomach the moment I stepped out of my car. It felt like the entire forest watched me with a silent, predatory curiosity. A shiver crawled up my spine and my breath caught before I could even unload my gear. Deep inside, I sensed something lurking, a presence that made my muscles tighten and heart pound like it wanted to burst. Every sound became a warning. The gravel beneath my boots, the distant crow, the whispering wind. The campsite looked peaceful on the surface, but the air held a tension I couldn't shake. I had planned a weekend of solitude, hoping to clear my head. I pitched my tent beneath a massive oak with gnarled limbs like twisted veins. Late afternoon sun spilled through the canopy, casting long, spidery shadows. But the quiet was wrong. Not the serenity I had hoped for, but a charged silence that made the hair on my neck stand up. I tried to write it off as stress, but as dusk fell, my unease deepened. My heartbeats turned shallow, my throat tightened, and my tongue went dry. I kept glancing around, searching for a threat I couldn't name. By the time I noticed the sweat soaking my back and the chill crawling along my arms, I knew something was wrong, whether in this place or inside me. Scene. Inside the tent. Night. The forest outside is silent. The fabric walls ripple faintly as the wind brushes past. Shadows move just out of focus. Action. The narrator lies still in their sleeping bag. Eyes dart. Every rustle, every shifting shadow outside sends shockwaves through their body. Cold sweat, shaking, breathing shallow. Eyes strain against the dark. Monologue. That first night I barely slept. I lay in my sleeping bag, eyes flicking back and forth in the darkness, haunted by shapes that vanished when I focused. Every rustle made my pulse spike. I kept thinking I saw a figure or felt a hand brushing the tent. I whispered it was just the wind, but deep down, I knew that was a lie. Morning brought no relief. I stood by a small lake, forcing myself to admire the smooth, mirror-like surface, but my gut twisted. It wasn't just anxiety. My skin crawled with goosebumps, and my mind spun with nameless dread. That's when I first saw or sensed it. A dark mist at the edge of my vision. I turned. Nothing. Just tall, still pines. But the presence lingered, a smudge on my sight that only revealed itself indirectly. Panic surged. Nausea rose. I blinked hard, trying to dismiss it. Was I losing my mind? Was this a breakdown? Scene. Late afternoon. Forest clearing. The tent in the background. The air grows colder. Shadows lengthen unnaturally. Action. The narrator returns to the tent, fists clenched. The mist continues to haunt their vision, pulsing with malicious intent. Firewood tumbles from shaking hands. The sun vanishes behind thick trees. Monologue. I forced myself to return to the tent. That mist never left the edges of my sight. It pulsed, wrapping cold tendrils around my thoughts. By sunset, I shook so badly I could hardly light a fire. My hands trembled as if I'd been locked in a freezer. When I finally coaxed flames to life, I sat there numb, overwhelmed, watching the dark sky swallow the treetops. Then I noticed something had changed. My senses had sharpened. I could feel the emotions of nearby animals, sense their fear like floating motes of light. It wasn't normal. I remembered the mist. Was it my terror made visible? Or something else? Something outside me? As the night deepened, I felt darkness creeping into me, linking me to that presence. A sickly hum vibrated behind my ears. It was tuning into me. My knees buckled beside the fire. I was drenched in sweat. My heart slammed in my chest. Every breath felt like a sob. I can't even remember how I survived that night without fleeing into the woods in blind panic. Scene. Highway. Daytime. Trees blur past. The narrator grips the steering wheel tightly. Eyes flick to the mirrors again and again. Breathing fast. Paranoia thick. Action. They drive. Every moment is tight with fear. Shoulders locked. Gaze scans every roadside shadow for signs of that drifting smudge. Monologue. The next morning, I packed up and left, convinced I was escaping a nightmare. But the drive felt endless. My body stayed tense. My eyes kept darting to the edge of the road, expecting to see that smudge drifting among the trees. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I felt relief flood me. I was home, safe, or so I thought. That comfort didn't last. Soon, I started seeing auras around people, emotions rendered as colors. Anxiety glowed gray, anger flickered red. I felt linked to them, aware of their states in ways that left me shaky. I realized my fear had opened a door I couldn't close. Then I saw it again. That mist. In my own hallway. Not just on the edge of vision anymore. It moved with predatory grace. My heart pounded so hard my chest ached. My limbs turned heavy. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I woke up soaked in sweat. Various interiors. Neighbors' houses, apartments. Subtle changes in behavior. Lights left on. Windows boarded up. People around the narrator begin changing. Fear spreads like mold. Lights never go off. Eyes never meet. Whispers behind doors. Monologue. Over the next days, I watched in horror as others around me changed. My neighbor, once fearless in the dark, refused to turn off his porch light. A friend began barricading her windows. They hadn't feared these things before. I realized then, my terror had infected them. It spread like a virus. I could see the psychic threads binding us, like a fungal network feeding on dread. Faces looked subtly different. Hunched shoulders, new lines of tension, haunted eyes. I understood then the mist wasn't hallucination. It was a parasite, fed on fear. It had tasted mine at the campsite and now used me as a carrier. Every new host developed sudden, intense phobias. When they were near, I saw black tendrils stretch from me to them. Invisible yet undeniable. I tried to isolate myself. No gatherings. No contact. I shut myself inside. My phone buzzed endlessly, but I didn't answer. I feared even messages might carry it. The narrator's apartment. Dark. Isolated. The mist lingers, creeping along walls and ceilings. Shadows pulse. The narrator sits motionless, consumed by fear. Black tendrils unfurl along the ceiling. Panic claws through their chest. Breath shallow. Vision blurs. Monologue. Every night, the mist coiled in my home's corners, creeping along baseboards, drawing nearer. One evening, trying to distract myself with a movie, I saw black tendrils stretch across the ceiling. My body seized. My heartbeat slammed in my ears. I gasped like I was drowning. The edges of my vision. Seen. A dim, quiet apartment shrouded in early dawn shadows. The air is thick, oppressive. An unseen weight seems to press down on the walls. Action. Blurred vision overtakes me, and I nearly faint, cold sweat slicking my forehead. I fight to steady my breath, forcing the wave of dread to subside, though I know the relief won't last. The parasitic entity is always close. Its spread becomes increasingly apparent. Someone in the hallway mentions another tenant has developed an irrational fear of flushing toilets. A friend texts about a vivid nightmare, trapped in an elevator, despite never having claustrophobia. Their confusion bleeds through every message, and guilt coils in my chest. I dive into researching obscure mental conditions, paranormal lore, anything. My eyes blur after hours online, until I uncover an eerie theory. Fear as energy, consumed by entities. A hidden mycelium linking terrified minds, feeding the parasite. Sleep deprivation gnaws at me. Each revelation pounds through my skull. My breath breaks in uneven bursts. I'm no closer to salvation, only more convinced I'm ensnared in something vast and horrifying. Monologue. One night I'd had enough. I decided to confront it. My plan vague, desperate. I thought if I could sever my emotions from its feeding channels, I could starve it. I turned off every light in my flat, sat in total darkness, and envisioned my fear as a substance I could withhold. The moment the light died, it came alive. I felt it swarm me, eager and coiling. My pulse galloped, but I fought to stay calm. Centered in my living room, every muscle tight, teeth chattering, shirt clinging with sweat, I visualized a wall, my mind's barrier. When its tendrils brushed my psyche, I imagined them rebounding, denied. My vision flickered with spots, but I held on. Slowly, the suffocating pressure lifted. I opened my eyes. The mist curled away, shrinking like I'd soured to its taste. My body trembled, drained, but I felt something I hadn't in weeks: power. The creature didn't vanish, but it weakened, as though I'd cut an essential chord. I practiced that state daily, keeping it hungry. The whispers around me lessened. Neighbors' panic faded. I still felt its presence, patient, hovering. But I met it with cold, focused calm. I told myself I was in control again. I ventured out more. The tension eased, though never fully. I knew the tether remained. It was lurking, waiting for fear to surge. But I'd gained ground. I glimpsed it still, at night, behind glass, beneath doorframes. It stirred my pulse, but I learned to suppress it. Fear tightly leashed. My life would never return to what it was. I'd brought something back from the woods. Parasite, an invisible mycelium woven into our dread. I had control, but not victory. Can't be destroyed, only held at bay. Every time I close my eyes, I brace for its return. The worst truth? It is always hungry, and that knowledge alone ensures I will never rest again. Scene. Flashback: the day I moved in. The apartment hallway light flickered as my key turned. The air grew dense, tightening my chest. I brushed off the unease as nerves, but it was no trick of imagination. It was a warning, and I ignored it. Action. The building was old, cheap, convenient. Rumored history, vague hints from neighbors. The facade. Grand, ominous, gargoyles, rain-worn stone, narrow windows choking off light. My first nights were quiet, too quiet, as if the structure itself was holding its breath. The pipes groaned oddly, like something slithered within. One night, aching with tension, I took a long hot shower, and it began. First a murmur under the water, maybe imagined. But as I rinsed my hair, whispers emerged. Distinct, disembodied. Panic surged. I stood frozen, soap stinging my eyes, unsure if the voices were real. Nausea hit. I slipped slightly, breath ragged. The whispering grew, like people murmuring just under the surface. I shut off the water, but the voices lingered before vanishing. I pressed my ear to the tiles, nothing. But my heartbeat roared. Monologue. I told myself it was just old pipes. Echoes. Pressure fluctuations. Stress hallucinations. But every time I showered, the voices returned, always just on the edge of hearing. They rose and fell with the stream like they were feeding off it. I couldn't understand them, but they clawed at my mind. The steam carried presence, not just heat. On the 5th day, I broke down and called a friend. My words were clumsy, strained. He offered reassurances. Play loud music, distract yourself. I tried. The whispers persisted, audible even over pounding speakers. My friend sensed my unease and told me to speak to the building superintendent. I did. His office was cramped, tucked in the basement. I described the voices. His expression was unreadable. He muttered something about clogged pipes and promised a check. But I saw it in his eyes. He knew. He just wouldn't say. That night, something new happened. The kitchen tap trickled at a strange angle. I turned it off and on again, same result. The droplets hovered mid-air before falling. My hands trembled. When I reached into the stream, a searing cold jolted through my fingers, unnatural and electric. The water wasn't just cold, it was wrong. And that was only the beginning. The haunting escalated. By the end of that week, stepping into the shower became a ritual of dread. Interior apartment bathroom, night. Water spirals mysteriously on the bathtub floor. Dim light reflects off the tiles. A low hum permeates the silence. Action. Swirls form and collapse like vortexes beneath the water, defying all natural order. Every curve seems sentient. The apartment lights stay on, not for visibility but for comfort. Night arrives. The air thickens. Shadows stretch longer. Monologue. The water, it started dancing. Not in any normal way but like it had a will. Each spiral sent a jolt through my nerves. I kept every light on. I knew it wouldn't help, but I needed something between me and the dark. Still, I'd wake up soaked in sweat, not sure if what I heard was a dream. Scraping sounds echoed, nails on pipes. Then that soft, rhythmic gurgle of water, almost musical. One night, I went for a drink and the tap turned itself on. Water shot upward like a needle, bending midair before splashing into the sink. It was like watching a rule of reality get broken. Couldn't breathe. When I finally touched the knob, it obeyed, stopped instantly. But the dripping sound that followed? It was a threat in disguise. Scene. Interior bathroom mirror morning. Toothbrush in hand. Eyes flicker to the mirror. The shower curtain stirs. Action. A silhouette behind the curtain twitches. Quivers. Wind? No, the window is locked. The air turns dense. Curtain flutters like breath. Monologue. I saw something. Just a shape at first. Behind the curtain. When I turned, nothing. Just droplets trembling near the drain like they wanted to speak. A chill shot through my spine. I fled. After that, every pipe groan became a warning. Sometimes I almost heard the voices. Begging. Accusing. My muscles were always clenched. I stopped sleeping deeply. Couldn't afford to. Scene. Interior apartment at night. Dusty desk lamp glows. Laptop screen displays old records. Coffee mug sits untouched. Action. Pages flick. Keywords searched. I scan local history files. Monologue. I needed answers. Why was the water behaving like this? Who were those voices? Maybe I was losing it. But the more I researched, the more I found. The building stood where an old estate once was. The owner? Obsessed with other worlds, especially ones beyond water. Experiments were mentioned. Vague ones. No records of families or missing people. But tenants leaving without notice? That happened. A lot. Always from the upper floors. Always sudden. Scene. Interior building office, day. Fluorescent lights buzz. The superintendent avoids eye contact. Action. His lips part slowly. He hesitates. Then speaks. Monologue. When I confronted him again, he cracked. Admitted barely above a whisper that this place had some kind of connection. An aquatic portal, he called it. Said the pipes acted as a bridge. Another world, waterlocked and full of souls. He called it folklore, but his voice shook. Scene. Interior bathroom, days later. Water bends again. It forms patterns mid-air. Sometimes faces. Sometimes arms. Action. Each shape appears for a blink, then vanishes. The air becomes damp and cold. Monologue. Things escalated. Water rose upward. Spun in the air. Sometimes I saw limbs. Half faces. I'd stumble out, heart racing, soaking in sweat. I began to feel eyes on me. Always. Once I saw a tall figure behind the shower curtain. It swayed, graceful, fluid. Then gone. But water circled my feet, retreating into the drain like it had found what it needed. Scene. Interior, kitchen, evening. Plates untouched. Sink barricaded. Microwave hums. Action. The protagonist avoids eye contact with the tap. Hunger fades. Dread grows. Monologue. Couldn't eat. Could barely move. My throat stayed closed like I was drowning. Then I snapped. I turned the shower on to confront it. The moment water hit porcelain, the voices came. Not one, but a choir of rage and grief. Steam filled the room, thick and alive. Shapes moved in the fog. The sink was my anchor. I clung to it. In that moment, I understood. These weren't just spirits, they were past tenants. Trapped. Screaming through the only portal they had. Scene. Interior bathroom, night. Water slithers up from the drain. It wraps around ankles like vines. Action. Legs are submerged. Eyes dart. Steam thickens. Monologue. Water surged against gravity. Cold as death. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. They didn't want to harm me, not directly. They wanted out. Or to be acknowledged. The shower became a ritual chamber. My thoughts raced. I remembered the main valve. Maybe if I turned it off. No portal, no voices. With all the strength I had left, I lunged and cut the water off. Silence slammed down. The quiet throbbed louder than the voices ever had. Scene. Interior bathroom door night. The protagonist sits back to the door. Eyes bloodshot. Pipes creak. Action. Ears twitch. Muscles tense. The faucet stays dry. Monologue. I didn't sleep. Just sat there. Listening. Waiting. The next day, I brought in a plumber. He just shrugged. Replaced a few pipes. Called it fixed. I didn't believe him. I left the water off. By day 2, I knew I couldn't live like this. But I also knew the thing behind the walls wasn't finished with me. So I acted. Scene. Interior apartment, day. Every drain is sealed. Plastic and towels cover sinks. The hallway is quiet. Action. Footsteps echo. Hands grip a toolbox. Monologue. I sealed every drain. Told the superintendent I was leaving unless he helped. He didn't argue. Just gave me directions, strange ones. Midnight. Basement. Valves. It sounded like ritual. But I went. Scene. Interior, basement, midnight. Pipes snake along the ceiling. Water drips. Shadows loom. Action. The protagonist walks cautiously. Wrench in hand. Breath shallow. Monologue. That place. It smelled like mildew and secrets. I followed his instructions. Found the old valves. Rusted shut. Twisted them with everything I had. Each turn rang like a scream. When the last valve sealed, a roar erupted in the pipes. Something thrashing on the other side. Then silence. Pure and final. My arms shook, but I stood my ground. Scene. Interior apartment at dawn. Sunlight seeps in. The faucet is turned. Action. A thin stream flows, normal. Harmless. Monologue. Back upstairs, something felt different. Lighter. The fog in the air was gone. I turned the tap. It flowed like it used to, just water. Nothing more. The apartment lay still, silent in the gray light filtering through dust-smeared blinds. The floor was cold beneath me, the air dense with the echoes of a lingering nightmare. The bathroom door hung ajar, steamless and still. Faint morning sun carved long shadows across the warped wooden panels, and the only sound was my breath. Action. I collapsed to my knees, breath coming in shudders, body trembling with exhaustion. The fear that had hounded me for weeks bled out of me in gasps. I remained 2 more days, watching, listening, fearing a return of the voices, but they never came. No levitating droplets, no warped murmurs, no writhing shadows. The building itself felt different, less sentient, less cruel. I made my choice. I packed. I locked the door. But the moment I turned the key, I heard it. A drip. Just one. I froze. Inside the bathroom, the faucet wept softly, methodically. I turned the knob. Silence. Then maybe a voice? Faint as mist. I shook, inhaled, and left. Monologue. Something had been closed. But something deeper remained. The gateway beneath that building, ancient and wet with malice, wasn't gone. Just sealed. And I, just a visitor it hadn't kept. Under morning light, my relief tangled with dread. I told myself I was free, a survivor. But that drop, that single echo, still whispers at the edge of my thoughts. Since then, every shower, every gurgle of a pipe, sends panic crawling under my skin. I see it still, those levitating droplets, those figures in the steam. I question everything. Did I close it? Or did I just delay its hunger? I think of others, less cautious, less lucky. I fear that what I escaped still waits and always will. Scene. The studio was dim, walls tall and windows fogged with urban glow. Fluorescent lights above twitched and buzzed in erratic rhythm. Paintings leaned like tired bodies in cluttered corners. It smelled of turpentine and stale air. A single easel stood beneath a buzzing desk lamp, the rest of the room cloaked in shadow. Action. The first time it came, I felt it, not saw it. Pressure. As if invisible fingers wrapped around my throat. I stood, brush in hand, paralyzed before a blank canvas. My heart thudded against my ribs, a drumbeat of pure animal fear. Then, a week later, while bent over my work, I caught motion. Not light, not flicker, movement. Dark, horned, pulsing like smoke, cat-sized. Watching. I blinked, it vanished. I lied to myself. Fatigue. Caffeine. But that night I shivered. Over days it returned. Always just outside vision. Always silent. The air grew metallic. Fluorescence buzzed to a rhythm like a hidden heart. I painted to purge it. Shapes, chaos, darkness. But it crept into the canvas. Horn silhouettes curling in the paint. Monologue. I told myself I was seeing things. But others felt it too. Friends recoiled from my work. One client dreamed of watchers in the dark. Another claimed the painting moved. Others heard whispers, felt watched, too afraid to touch the art again. Their voices shook when they spoke. I was unraveling. My dreams mirrored theirs. That shape, that presence. I began trembling at the easel. Sweat pooled in my shirt. My art was no longer mine. The boundary blurred. I think now it used me. Used my hands, my brush, my fear. One night, I sat beneath the dim lights trying to work. When the smell hit me, foul, rotting. I gagged. My eyes watered. I looked around, but the studio was empty, except for the thing I had painted into being. Dim moonlight spills through the cracked window panes of the artist's loft. Canvases lean against one another like mute witnesses. The studio is silent, until a cold shift in the air signals a presence. Action. As I rose to investigate, I spotted the figure again, this time clearer than ever. Its body writhed like coiling smoke, but the horns were tangible, jutting from its hunched form. It moved an inch, no more, but a chill gripped me like a phantom's touch. My breath snagged in my throat, sweat instantly soaking my skin. It stared at me, though eyeless, its gaze burned like iron against flesh. I tried to speak, but my mouth was dust. My tongue rasped against dry gums, and all I managed was a shaky exhale. Then, impossibly fluid, it drifted to the base of my newest canvas. I watched in frozen horror as the black mist merged with the still wet paint, leaving a faint, almost imperceptible mark. The moment it touched the painting, the rotting stench vanished, replaced by the sharp tang of ozone, like a lightning strike sealed in the air. I ripped the canvas from the easel and stashed it behind older work, hoping hiding it would silence the memory. But questions swarmed my mind. Had I gone mad? Was it hallucination? Or something older and malevolent threading itself through my art? Monologue. Weeks passed as I pored over esoteric texts and obscure mythologies. Some ancient cultures believed spirits could inhabit objects, paintings, idols, sculptures, using them as portals for forgotten gods. One obscure sect described a smoky being with stubby horns, said to thrive on the energy of creation. As I read more, the cold in my spine intensified. My pulse stayed elevated. Anxiety flitted through me like a trapped insect. I remembered patrons' cryptic messages, nightmares and visions they shared. It wasn't just me. The entity was communicating through my work, haunting each sale, slipping into homes and lives. Realization struck like a fist. I had become a conduit. I tried to stop painting, but some unholy compulsion seized my hands. They twitched with need, aching to translate the visions clawing at my mind. Each time I relented, the figure appeared again, hiding in brush strokes, horned curves and backgrounds, shadowy swirls forming half-seen silhouettes. I bled my palms with clenched fists, trying to resist, but it was useless. The pull was consuming. I sought help from an old friend versed in occultism. He never said it directly, but his fear was clear. Destroy the pieces. He warned of spirits attracted to devotion, and asked if I'd noticed temperature drops, electrical oddities. I confirmed everything and saw terror bloom in his eyes. The only solution, he said, was to sever the connection, destroy the artwork. Yet the thought of destroying my creations filled me with dread. One night, I gathered myself and approached the canvases with a metal bin for burning. But dread tightened like a noose. As I reached out, claws scraped against the floor. My vision blurred. Bile rose. I collapsed, overcome by choking fear. Space bent inward, air thinned. I knew then the entity wouldn't just stop me. It would break me, so I stopped. Curled on the floor, panting, soaked in sweat, I stared at the canvas that stared back. Could I escape this? I considered leaving, fleeing the studio, my art, all of it. But the works were already dispersed, hung in homes, galleries beyond my reach. In desperation, I devised a new plan. Starve the entity of attention. I bought thick black drapes and spent a day covering every painting. Each approach chilled me to the bone. Fear tasted metallic. My hands trembled. Sweat stung my eyes. I heard the scraping again, but drowned it with the sound of fabric unfurling. When the final piece was covered, the room stilled. Not peace, something closer to a ceasefire. I barely slept, heart pounding, ears trained on every creak and rustle. The figure never fully reappeared, but I felt it, lurking in the shadows of my mind. Clients still wrote, plagued by dreams. I ignored them, refused commissions, claimed artistic hiatus. In truth, I feared even doodling might awaken it. I forced myself away from the easel. Withdrawal clawed at me. My hands jittered. My mind itched for color and line. But the darkness lessened. Shadows stopped twitching. Air lightened. Eventually, I left. I packed a bag, left the draped canvases behind, and gave my keys to the building manager. I moved across town. Now my new flat is filled with light. I keep windows wide, curtains open, sunlight touching every corner. Still, some nights, I wake drenched in sweat, heart hammering like it wants out. I remember the scratching, the dark shapes. I listen for the smallest noise, fearing its return. It hasn't come, but I don't feel safe. I sense it lingers in hidden canvases, in patrons' dreams, or somewhere deeper, woven into the very act of creation. Every piece sold, every painting displayed, carries its whisper. The air felt thick, almost oppressive. I stood at the window, eyes scanning the horizon, my mind a swirl of unease and curiosity. The sensation never left me. This quiet, constant tug, as if something unseen, yet undeniably real, was searching for me. I couldn't escape the question that gnawed at me. Would the horned figure return? Would it find me again, waiting at the fringes of my consciousness, beckoning me to pick up a brush, to paint, to create? It whispered promises I feared, a silent invitation to surrender to its will. There were nights, late and quiet, when the weight of that uncertainty pressed heavy on my chest. My heart would race, goosebumps would prickle across my skin. And then, I'd feel it, the intelligence, the presence, far beyond the glass of my window, watching, waiting. The sensation was subtle, a whisper at first, but it never ceased. I tried to dismiss the thought. I had, after all, resisted. I'd lived in a delicate balance, one that didn't involve the brushstrokes that had once defined my life. But I knew. I felt the compulsion growing, that strange, silent pull in my fingertips, to create, to sketch. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. I'd seen what happened before, what spread from the edges of the canvas like a slow-moving epidemic. The horns, the smoke, the nightmares. They were still fresh in my mind, vivid, unsettling. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't truly free. There was always a part of me that wondered if one day, I would slip. I would paint and it would be too late. Action. I tried to keep everything normal. I went about my day, pretending nothing had changed, but the tension in the air was palpable. Sometimes, in the quiet hours of the morning, when the world was still and the house was empty, I would hear the faintest of sounds, a rustling, a breath, almost too faint to detect, but I would feel it deep within my bones. It was in those moments I couldn't ignore it. I would stand at the window, pulse quickening, hands clammy. The same dread I had learned to live with crept over me again. Stronger now, a constant looming presence. Was I still in control? Or had the balance I had fought so hard to maintain begun to crumble? I wasn't sure if I could bear the thought of giving in. But the pull, it would always be there. In the stillness, in the weight of the air, in the rustling of leaves just outside my window. Monologue. I can't keep living like this. This unease, this thing that watches. Sometimes, I think I hear it calling me, waiting for me to slip. It's always there, lurking just outside the frame, just beyond the reach of my vision. I can feel it more now, the pressure, the constant hum in the back of my mind. It's not gone. It hasn't left, not really. The question, it haunts me. What if one day I can't resist? What if the brush, the pencil, the urge to create overwhelms me? What if I become part of that darkness, the one that has claimed every canvas, every stroke before? No, I have to stay strong. I have to keep my distance, even if it's only a fragile thread that keeps me tethered. But sometimes, when the silence becomes too heavy, when I stand by the window and the city feels like it's watching me back, I wonder how long this will last. How long before it finds me, before I lose the battle and let it in again. Scene 2. The house felt wrong from the moment I stepped through the door. At first, it was subtle, a heaviness in the air, like something unseen was pressing down on me. I tried to dismiss it as I had so many times before, but there it was, lingering, unshakable. The house creaked and groaned as if it were alive, its old bones shifting in the quiet. I'd moved in recently, eager to settle into a space that could hold the weight of my life. But something about the house unsettled me. It was too quiet, too still. The walls seemed to sigh, the floorboards groaned underfoot. And the basement, the one place I avoided, was the source of my unease. I never ventured down there, but the thought of it filled me with dread. Soon, odd things began to happen. Small noises, a squeak in the living room, a yelp in the night. At first, I thought it was one of the dogs, Moose and Ginger, but when I checked, they were sound asleep. The hairs on my neck stood on end. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that something was watching me from the dark. Action. The days grew stranger. The more I tried to ignore it, the more persistent the feeling became. I would hear sounds at night, creaks, whispers. It wasn't the house. It was something else. The dogs began acting strange, barking at empty corners, growling at shadows. At times, they would stare at nothing, their eyes wide with fear. I began hearing strange noises too, faint echoes of my own voice, calling from somewhere else in the house. I tried to keep it together, going through the motions of daily life, but the fear gnawed at me. The tension in the air was unbearable. My body felt tense, my mind frayed. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, waiting. Monologue. Every night, the silence weighs on me like a physical thing. I can feel it, this presence. It's always there, just behind me. I can't escape it, no matter where I go in this house. And then there's the barking. Moose's bark, clear as day, coming from the basement. But when I checked, he was right there, staring at me. The house is breathing, I swear it. I don't know what it wants. I don't know how long I can stand this. But I won't leave. I can't. Not yet. Maybe that's what it wants, too. For me to break. But I won't. Not until I find out what's really happening here. Scene. My body froze, my mind struggling to make sense of the impossible vision in front of me. I couldn't speak, my mouth dry as sandpaper, and my heartbeat thundered in my ears. A wave of nausea hit, leaving me unable to breathe properly, trembling in place. Action. Before me stood a replica of myself, its expression eerily calm. Tilted its head, studying me like a specimen. I wanted to scream, to run, but my muscles locked, trapped as if in a nightmare. My doppelganger spoke in a voice that was mine yet not mine, soft, drained of emotion. The entity explained it was the living manifestation of the house, suggesting it had gained awareness over time, learning from each resident. Its voice mirrored my own, but it felt as though the thoughts were being projected directly into my mind. Monologue. The house, it seemed, had developed consciousness, and now it made copies of its inhabitants, forging doubles that existed alongside the originals. As it spoke, I felt the walls around us pulse and sync, a breath-like rhythm that made my heart race. The realization struck me hard. This place existed in multiple dimensions, with infinite versions of each person overlapping in the same space. I thought of the strange sounds, the basement whispers, the barking, the flickers at the edges of my vision. Could these be echoes from parallel realities? My breath quickened as a cold sweat soaked my back, a dizzying sense of claustrophobia building up. The doppelganger's eyes, my own eyes, stared at me coldly, devoid of warmth, like a reflection without a soul. I couldn't look at it for long. My body trembled, heart pounding in terror. I backed away slowly, my legs shaky, knees threatening to buckle. My dogs, Moose and Ginger, were gone, and dread settled over me like a heavy fog. Could the house create duplicates of them too? The doppelganger didn't follow, allowing me to leave, or perhaps simply curious to see what I would do. I forced myself to remain calm as I moved down the hallway, each step sending shocks of pain through my body. Every instinct screamed for escape, but my mind wondered if leaving would even matter. What if the house existed across all dimensions? Would stepping outside truly be an escape? I reached the front door, expecting resistance. Jammed locks, stuck door handles, but it opened easily with a quiet click. Daylight poured in so bright it made my head spin. I gasped for fresh air, running down the steps and into the street, my heart roaring in my ears, tears streaming down my face. I had no destination, just the overwhelming urge to keep moving. Eventually, I found myself in my car, gasping for breath, shirt soaked with sweat. The dogs were in the back seat. Somehow I had managed to put them there in my panic, and I kept glancing at them in the rearview mirror, fearing they might flicker or change form. I don't know if I'll ever sleep again. The house's words still echo in my mind. I can't shake the thought that the building exists across countless realities, stacking versions of each person, trapped in its grasp. Sometimes, late at night, I hear my name whispered in my own voice, distant and faint. A cold shiver runs down my spine as I lie there, paralyzed, too terrified to move. The worst part is realizing that escape may never be possible. Even now, I feel the house's pull, its ability to mimic my every thought and action. If it can do it once, it can do it again. I'm hyper-aware of my own reflection, my footsteps, my voice. Any tiny distortion, any strange echo in my new surroundings, sets my nerves on edge. The house, though I'm far from its walls, still feels alive watching me. It lurks on the edge of my existence, half in my memories, half in a dimension I can't reach. I know it's out there, and somewhere my doppelganger might be waiting for me to return. And that, more than anything, is a terror that never leaves. The office was supposed to be my safe space, a place where I felt comfortable and in control. Yet something shifted that night. I was alone, working late, like I often did to avoid the morning rush and get ahead on system updates. The building felt emptier than usual, its cold, silent halls stretching out in eerie quiet. My footsteps echoed on the hallway tiles, louder than they should have been, swallowed by the strange hollowness that now seemed to surround me. I had just come from the restroom when the buzz of my phone broke through my haze, snapping me back to reality. It was Marcus. Action. Marcus had left earlier that day, complaining of a headache and switching off his phone before heading home. I remembered his joking promise to be unreachable for the night. But here it was, his name glowing on the screen. I answered without thinking, almost expecting silence. But instead, static crackled through the receiver. I could barely make out the sound of someone breathing heavily. I called his name again, more urgently this time. The hiss of static continued, and then, a distorted whisper of my own name pierced through, stretching each syllable like a warning. My heart raced. I asked if he was okay, but the only response was more static before the call abruptly cut out, leaving me standing there in the suffocating silence of the empty hallway. Monologue. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just a glitch or maybe a prank. Phones do strange things sometimes, don't they? But something about the distorted voice, the breathy static, stuck in my gut like a heavy stone. I needed to shake it off to return to normal. I hurried back to my cubicle, my fingers itching for the comfort of routine tasks. But even as I tried to focus on the updates flashing on my screen, my thoughts kept drifting back to that call. My pulse still fluttered in my throat as I nervously checked my phone for any new messages from Marcus. I typed him a quick note on our company chat, asking if he had called me. The message stayed marked as unread, sitting there, taunting me. Scene. Trying to distract myself, I rebooted a server, but the screen flickered violently. The lines of text on the monitor started scrolling at an insane speed, flashing strange symbols. Then an image appeared, an office that looked identical to mine but wrong. The lighting was dim, tinted with an unhealthy yellow, and the shadows stretched unnaturally. A figure sat at a desk. At least it looked like me. But its face was contorted in a silent scream, eyes wide, mouth stretched in terror. My stomach lurched. The screen flickered back to normal, leaving only the login prompt, but the tremor in my hands wouldn't stop. Action. Desperate to make sense of what I had just seen, I rushed to the surveillance room. The security feeds from around the building all seemed normal, empty hallways, silent offices. A brief relief washed over me, but then I noticed something odd. A camera feed had activated on its own. The angle was wrong, showing a part of the office from a corner that didn't exist. The image was grainy, drenched in a cold, monochromatic gloom. At first, it was just a vague figure moving between desks. But then it stopped. The figure turned. Its eyes glinted unnaturally, reflecting the dim light like an animal at night. Monologue. My heart skipped a beat. The figure, it looked like someone I knew, but they weren't supposed to be there. Panic gripped me and I tried to control the feed, but the software wouldn't respond. My hands trembled as I clicked on the mouse, each click echoing in the tight, claustrophobic room. The feed vanished, replaced by an error message, and I was left staring at the ordinary security cameras again. But the feeling of being watched didn't fade. It grew. I felt eyes on me, even though I was alone. My breath came in shallow gasps, and I could almost taste the sharp tang of fear. Scene. Trying to find some rational explanation, I decided to check the building's electrical systems. The elevator ride down to the basement felt like I was descending into a tomb. The overhead lights flickered intermittently, casting nauseating flashes that made my stomach churn. A faint whisper seemed to echo in the cramped, stale air. When I reached the basement, the hum of faulty lighting buzzed through the walls, vibrating in my chest. The shadows around me seemed to stretch unnaturally, and the air felt heavy. Action. Inside the electrical room, everything appeared normal. The power grid showed no surges or drops. But just as I was about to leave, I heard it. My name. It came from the air itself, slipping through the corridor, like the same hiss I had heard on Marcus's call. The hairs on my arms stood up, and my breath caught in my throat. I needed to get out. I couldn't stay in that basement any longer. Monologue. I took the elevator back up, trying to text Marcus again, but my app froze. Then, in an instant, the screen went black, and I was left staring at my own reflection. My heart nearly stopped. I could have sworn I saw something behind me in the reflection. A shape. I spun around in panic, but the elevator was empty. The walls were cold and sterile, the metallic echo of my footsteps ringing in my ears. My chest tightened, and I couldn't breathe. The doors opened with a loud scrape, and I nearly stumbled out of the elevator. Scene. Back in the office, I was ready to leave, to escape. But as I approached my cubicle, my computer screen flickered to life on its own. An email appeared, sent from me to me at the exact current time. The subject line read, "They're almost here. Action." Fear crawled up my spine as I opened the email. Inside was a single line of text. "We are waiting." My stomach dropped. I tried to turn off the computer, but it resisted. The screen flickered, showing a version of me, pale, haunted, typing at a desk covered in rotting electronics. Then the screen went dark. Monologue. I stared at my reflection, my skin cold, sweat dripping down my face. I tried to reason with myself, thinking it was exhaustion, stress, a hacking attempt. But deep down, I knew something else was at play, something I couldn't explain. And the more I tried to understand, the more I felt the grip of something. Waiting. The office is empty and eerily quiet. The usual noises from the outside world have dulled into an unsettling silence. Fluorescent lights flicker in the corner of the room, casting long, distorted shadows. Time seems to stretch, as though the building is suspended in a bubble separate from the world outside. The hum of the vending machine is muted, and everything feels wrong. Every corner seems to harbor a secret. A deep sense of dread presses in from all sides, suffocating me as I move. The air is thick with tension, my body stiff with fear. Action. I dart around the room, eyes scanning the dimly lit office. My breath is short, my heart racing as I hurry to gather my things. I grab my bag, the weight of my fear dragging me down. My throat is dry, my limbs trembling. Should I leave or stay? I don't know, but my instincts scream at me to escape whatever is happening here. Sprinting towards the exit, the overhead lights flicker wildly, matching the rapid beat of my heart. Then my phone vibrates. Reluctantly, I glance at the screen. It's the same unknown dimension feed, but now it's a live video call request. A figure stands in a room just like mine, bathed in that same eerie yellowish glow. I freeze. The figure wears my exact outfit. The same checkered shirt, the same navy pants. He holds a phone to his ear, and his vacant stare sends a chill down my spine. The sensation of being watched seeps through me, as though he's looking directly at me. I can almost feel the connection between us, a gap bridging through the device in my hand. My heart lurches, terror gripping me. Monologue. I fight the urge to answer. The text notification that appears on my screen makes my blood run cold. Please let me in. I feel like I'm suffocating, drenched in sweat as panic surges through me. I can't let it grow stronger, I tell myself. With shaking fingers, I power down the phone, almost dropping it in my frenzy. I stand there, a haze of confusion clouding my mind. The lights flicker once more, but this time they dim so severely that the hallway becomes a tunnel of shadows. I hear my name, whispered faintly through the vents or maybe from behind the walls. It's impossible to tell. My body reacts before my mind can process, and I yank the door open, stumbling into the night. Outside, the harsh wind blasts my face, carrying the sting of pollution and the metallic taste of impending rain. The streetlights seem dimmer than usual, as though the office's darkness is spilling out into the world. My thoughts are in turmoil, spinning in a never-ending loop. Did I just connect with another reality? Or is my mind unraveling from stress? I try to ground myself, placing my hands on a concrete pillar, focusing on the gritty texture beneath my palms. My pulse hammers in my ears, but I have to keep moving. I need to find Marcus to figure out what's happening. But my phone is off, disassembled, and I can't risk turning it back on. The feeling of being followed refuses to leave. As I walk home, I glance at reflections in passing windows, half expecting to see that distorted version of myself lurking behind me. Scene. I arrive at my apartment, and it feels off just like the office. The lights flicker, and the router keeps rebooting. Error messages flood my screen, warning about unknown networks. A knot forms in my stomach, but I push forward. I reconnect my phone battery, long enough to send a single message to Marcus. I can barely hold the phone steady, and my fingers tremble as I type. The reply comes almost instantly. Stop. It's too late. Action. I stare at the message, a cold chill spreading through me. Marcus had never been this distant, and his words offer no explanation, no reassurance. What does he mean? Has he been trapped in that parallel world? Or is he warning me about the merging of our realities? The implications of his words weigh heavily on my mind. I lock every door, power down every device, but it doesn't help. The oppressive gloom settles over me. Shadows in every corner seem to shift and move, eager for the barrier to break. I sit frozen, paralyzed by the fear of what's to come. Every flicker of light, every small sound sends waves of panic through me. I can't sleep, can't escape the dread that claws at my mind. Monologue. The first hints of dawn bring no relief. I feel hollow, drained from the endless battle with something I can't comprehend. It's as though I'm trapped in a nightmare, only I can't wake up. The worst part is the uncertainty. Whenever I walk into the office now, I wonder if the next flicker of the screen will show me that other side again. If my phone buzzes unexpectedly, my body tenses, ready to throw it across the room. The dread never fully leaves. I'm hypervigilant, distrustful of every shadow, every reflection. And Marcus? He's avoiding me. I can't force him to explain. Maybe he's running from something he can't grasp either. But I can't shake the thought that this phenomenon isn't over. It's just waiting for the right moment to resurface. What happens when the barrier finally collapses? If technology keeps bridging the gap between our reality and that other world, what comes next? My nightmares are full of overlapping realities, buildings flickering in and out of existence, and the other me stepping into my world. I'm trapped in a life that feels less and less real with each passing day. And every screen, every line of code, every hum in the wires is a reminder that something watches, something waits. Scene. I haven't found any answers yet. The rift is still there, invisible but undeniable. It waits, and I wait too, fear and hope mingling in the pit of my stomach. Every time I see a flicker of yellow light in my periphery, my heart skips. I brace myself, expecting the worst. But there's no certainty. The calls, the emails, the mirrored images, they could return at any moment. Monologue. It's a constant reminder. We are not alone. Somewhere, on the other side, something watches us. And when the worlds finally collide, no one will be ready. But for now, I hold on to hope, to the fragile belief that vigilance can keep the darkness at bay. Yet in the quiet moments, I know the truth. The barrier is weakening, and when it breaks, it may already be too late. The air in my home has shifted. I've been tracking the odd changes in my belongings for days, noting how each item returns slightly altered. One of the first to draw my attention was my coffee mug. It felt colder to the touch, its ceramic now possessing an unfamiliar metallic feel. The glaze seemed to shimmer in strange marbling patterns, like veins of discoloration, an unsettling shift from what I once knew. Other objects, too, returned different. My grandfather's wooden box had elongated hinges that seemed almost alive, like the legs of an insect. Each time I examined these objects, they grew heavier, the textures unfamiliar, as though they belonged to some other reality. I tried to ignore the feeling, tried to convince myself they were just small changes. But deep inside I knew something was wrong. Action. The feeling was creeping into my dreams. I could see those same unsettling patterns, marbling, insect-like shapes, clinging to the walls of my house. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, convinced the room around me had shifted, that the corners had stretched further during the night. It felt like I was being suffocated. The darkness in the room now something that moved, something that watched. My breath would come in quick gasps, sheets tangled around me, certain I could hear something moving beneath the floorboards. But when I strained to listen, all I could hear was my own breathing, ragged and frantic. As I got closer to these altered objects, I began to hear a low buzz in my ears, a vibration nauseating, coming from deep within my skull. Touching them felt worse, like something inside me was responding, pulling at me with every contact. My pulse would race, my vision blurred. Sometimes I felt like I might faint, as though I was no longer in the right place. The objects had become anchors, and I was slipping away from my own reality. Monologue. The more I researched, the clearer the picture became. I found references to ancient rituals that used mundane objects as vessels for otherworldly entities. Every time one of my things crossed the boundary between worlds, it returned changed, more deeply connected to that foreign place. At first, I recoiled at the thought of something using my possessions as a foothold, but soon I realized how meticulous the pattern was. It was like the items were keys, unlocking doors to a reality not meant for us. I began marking each disappearance in my calendar. It always happened on time. Each time something was gone, dread gnawed at me, my body trembling as I awaited the inevitable return. I spoke to a friend, though I avoided the specifics, just vague talk of objects vanishing, changing. His reaction was a mix of concern and disbelief. He suggested it was stress, overwork, anything to explain it away. But I knew, deep down, that something was happening, something I couldn't stop. Scene. One day, the clock from my living room disappeared. A heavy silence filled the house. It was as though time itself had ceased. I paced, checked corners, but there was no change. The light above flickered erratically, making me flinch with every sudden movement. The air felt thicker, charged, as though something was pushing against the edges of my home. 3 days later, the clock reappeared. I found it in the attic, perched precariously on a rotting beam. My heart raced as I stared at it. The face of the clock had changed. The numbers had stretched, twisting into serpentine shapes, their hands moving in short, erratic bursts. I couldn't bring myself to touch it with bare skin, so I wore thick gloves. When I held it, I felt a deep pulse, like the rhythm of something much larger than my own heartbeat. It was alive in a way I couldn't understand. Action. The next days passed with a rising sense of dread. I could feel the presence more clearly now, an entity slowly attaching itself to my belongings. Each time I approached the altered objects, my body would grow cold, as if stepping into a frigid pocket of air. Shadows in the corners of my vision flickered, disappearing the moment I tried to focus on them. Once I saw something scuttling across the floor, a cluster of jointed limbs, like something not meant for this world. My breath caught in my throat. I dropped my mug, shattering it. But the next morning it was back, whole again, sitting where it had always been. This wasn't just a distortion of my belongings. It was a break in reality itself. I ran my fingers over the walls, feeling the texture ripple under my touch, the paint like tissue. Even my reflection in the mirror lagged, almost as if someone else was standing behind me, watching. The lights flickered with a malevolent purpose, making me feel trapped in a maze of shifting shadows. I realized that the items weren't just anchors. They were conduits. Every time I touched one, it felt like part of me was being pulled away. Monologue. The fear gnawed at me, a constant weight in my chest. I barely slept, my mind too foggy, too filled with the terror of what might disappear next. My body was always on edge, my heart rate high, my skin tingling. I started researching ways to ward off dimensional creatures. I studied ancient folklore, cleansing rituals, symbols of protection. I needed to sever this link between my home and whatever was creeping in from the other side. I burned sage, scattered salt, carved symbols above the doors. The house reeked of panic, the air thick with a desperate hope that something, anything, would stop the force that was invading. Then one day it happened. The final disappearance. The trunk that had been in my family for generations vanished exactly when I expected. My throat went dry, my palms slick with sweat. This was it. The final moment. I couldn't shake the feeling that if the trunk returned, it would bring something far worse with it. I felt it in my bones, the final key, the final anchor to a place not meant for this world. Scene. I spent the days leading up to the trunk's return in a haze, unable to sleep, my thoughts spinning with terror. When it finally reappeared, I found it in the center of the living room, half covered by shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. My heart thundered in my chest as I approached it. The trunk had changed, its surface no longer wood and metal, but slick and organic, coated with a dark, glistening slime. Strange patterns pulsed across it, symbols that seemed to vibrate in time with my own heartbeat. I knew, deep down, that it was alive, a gateway between worlds. With my muscles coiled tight, I stepped closer. If this was the final key, I had to destroy it. I had no choice. My mind raced, but the desperation to end this was all-consuming. I needed to break the link before it was too late. I knew something was wrong the moment I heard it. The slow, incessant drip behind my bedroom wall. That night, The streetlights outside seemed dimmer than usual, casting pale, ghostly beams through the thin curtains. The air itself felt thick, charged with a dampness that made my throat tighten. My heart beat erratically. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just the plumbing acting up, or maybe I'd left a faucet running. But deep down, that persistent tap, tap, tap echoed in my mind like a distant warning from the depths of the ocean. Something I wasn't yet ready to face. My name is Daniel, and I've lived in this cramped, one-bedroom apartment for nearly a year. It's situated on a quiet street, bordered by an abandoned parking lot and an old liquor store. The walls are plain, almost colorless, and the floors creak if you step in just the right spots. It wasn't much, but it was enough until recently. Lately, I've begun to feel as though I'm not the only one in this space. At first, it was a tingle at the back of my neck whenever I passed the small hallway mirror, as though someone lingered just beyond my reflection. Then came the faint taste of salt in the air, as if a sea breeze was blowing past, though I live nowhere near the coast. The smell clung to my clothes and hair, refusing to dissipate. I tried to brush it off as paranoia, telling myself it was the stress of work, or an overactive imagination spurred on by too many late-night horror movies. But the sensations grew more persistent. Lying in bed, I would sometimes hear a low, raspy breath near my ear. Other nights, I would wake up, heart pounding, convinced I felt cold droplets of water trickling down my arms, though my sheets remained dry. It wasn't long before I saw him. On a night like any other, I had been dozing off, half lost in a dream of bottomless whirlpools. Then I woke to a flicker at the foot of my bed. The room was too dark for clear vision, but I saw a silhouette, a figure that made every hair on my body stand on end. He looked ancient, dressed in rags that might have once been a sailor's uniform. A large brimmed hat shadowed most of his face, but I could make out long strands of seaweed-like hair draped across a sunken face. Next to him, something low to the ground, roughly the size of a large dog, shifted in place. It resembled a sea lion but moved in unnatural silence. Panic gripped me, tightening my throat. I froze, holding my breath, certain it was some nightmare. But then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the figure and its companion vanished. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. My heart hammered relentlessly, and my skin felt clammy, as if I'd been splashed with ocean water. I stayed up, pacing the living room, flicking on every light I could find in an attempt to banish the darkness. Over the next few days, I struggled to maintain some semblance of normalcy. I went to work, typed up reports, and engaged in small talk with colleagues. But something had changed in me. My hands trembled at the slightest provocation, the tension in my neck and shoulders unbearable. Every time I blinked, I saw the old sailor's silhouette burned into the back of my eyelids. Friends asked if I was ill, or if I had been drinking. I claimed I was fine, but I feared they could sense my growing paranoia. My mouth would go dry, even when I was sipping water, and I felt a suffocating sense of brine in my lungs, as though I were inhaling sea air. Then the walls began to betray me. I noticed wet streaks forming near the baseboards of the bedroom. The water had an oily sheen, shimmering faintly in the dim light. When I ran my finger along one streak, I tasted salt on my skin, sharp and undeniable. The drip behind the wall became more persistent, echoing day and night, pushing me to the brink of insanity. Maintenance staff insisted there was no leak and dismissed my complaints, suggesting perhaps a spill or condensation. One evening, while brushing my teeth, I sensed movement behind me. I turned to see the faint outline of the sea lion-like creature, its eyes glowing with a haunting, phosphorescent green that seemed both curious and malevolent. I whipped around, nearly choking on toothpaste, only to glimpse the reflection of the old mariner in the mirror, hunched in the corner, his hat dripping with water. When I spun back, the bathroom was empty. My heart raced so hard it hurt, and I felt short of breath, as though the air had been siphoned out of the room, leaving only the stale weight of dread. I began questioning my grip on reality. Stress, sleep deprivation, or perhaps I was losing my mind. But each night, the dreams of sinking into cold, black water persisted. I would wake gasping, my lungs burning, and then one morning, I found something that shattered my sanity. Gill-like slits around my neck, thin, inflamed lines that felt tender to the touch. It was impossible to remain calm. I nearly collapsed in front of the mirror, panic turning my stomach to ice. My heart thundered in my ears, and a cold sweat coated my entire body. I tried to reassure myself that it was some bizarre rash or allergic reaction. But the following night, I dreamt of breathing underwater, gasping in lungfuls of salty water while dark shapes swam around me. The transformation of my apartment escalated at an alarming rate. The persistent smell of salt hung over everything. Puddles of water appeared in corners of the living room without a source. The windows grew foggy, like portholes trapped in dense fog at sea. Some nights, I felt invisible currents swirling around my legs, as though the floor had become a shallow tide pool. My chest tightened constantly, as if anticipating a fresh wave of dread. Curiosity gnawed at me. I began leaving scraps of paper, recording the times when I heard the dripping or glimpsed the spectral duo. I became fixated on patterns, hoping that deciphering them might reveal the reason behind all this. Through these hushed appeals, I began to sense that the old mariner was not a random haunting. He was ancient, burdened with centuries of knowledge, and the spectral sea lion, always by his side, seemed to be a guardian or emissary of something far older and far darker than I could ever comprehend. Nights grew heavier. My breathing would change in my sleep, rattling through the slits in my neck, leaving me half suffocated by morning. Strangest of all, I stopped fearing actual drowning. Instead, I developed a strange dread of dryness. My lips cracked, my throat burned, and I found myself craving the taste of salt water. I stood in hot showers just to inhale the steam, letting it collect in my lungs. Then, one night I will never forget. The mariner seemed to speak, though his words were less like speech and more a collection of gurgles and whispers that scraped across the inside of my mind. The essence of his message was clear. He was a guardian of ancient, forbidden knowledge from the ocean's deepest trenches. He had come to show me the truths of realms hidden far below the surface, of creatures and gods best left undisturbed. I felt my stomach flip, my hands trembling uncontrollably. The very air seemed to reek of sea rot, and the faint cry of distant storms echoed in my ears. My heart felt like it might burst from my chest, yet an inexplicable fascination held me in place. Not long after, the physical environment of my home grew even more sinister. Phosphorescent shapes glided across my walls, shifting like schools of deep-sea fish. The ceiling became draped in a swirling murk that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. My furniture grew damp, salty, flecked with bits of algae. My television flickered with images of rolling ocean waves, even when it was powered off. The constant drip behind the walls now resonated with a low hum that vibrated through the floorboards. My ankles tingled as though something brushed against them, a near weightless pull that reminded me of underwater currents. And I knew I was no longer alone. Water had begun to pool beneath my door when a neighbor knocked, asking if I was all right. I tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. My voice clung to the back of my throat like wet clay, and I couldn't meet his eyes. I just waved him off and shut the door. The apartment no longer felt like a place for people. The air was too thick, the floor always slick. My clothes never dried. Light shimmered beneath the furniture as though something bioluminescent lived beneath it. And whenever I stood still for too long, I felt myself sinking, dragged downward by some slow, invisible current. So I didn't stop moving. I paced constantly, as though motion alone could keep me from drowning. I sat on the cushions, heart pounding, when the first shape came through. The sea lion, its body haloed in a faint blue glow. It emerged without sound, gliding through the apartment like it belonged there. The mariner followed. Silent, soaked to the bone, his coat dripping, hat plastered to his forehead. My chest constricted. My mouth felt full of sand. I should have run, but I didn't. I waited, not out of courage, but because I couldn't take another second of not knowing. And when he appeared, awe overtook fear. He was a symbol of judgment or invitation or maybe surrender. He raised one finger and pointed to a wall where a crust of salt spread like a living thing. I stepped forward. My feet moved before my mind caught up. Behind me, the sea lion exhaled warm breath across my neck. I pressed my palm to the wall. It pulsed, warm and wet, and then split open. Water exploded over my hand and down my arm, and a sharp heat bloomed in my neck. I collapsed, gasping, as gills tore themselves into being along my skin. I choked on the air. The wall pulsed again, and something poured into me. Not just water, but visions, of trenches so deep light couldn't find them, of ancient, heaving bodies sleeping in salt, of languages that scraped at the back of the skull like barnacles. I was changing, becoming. Part of me wanted it. The rest of me howled in terror. Shapes began to writhe in the wallpaper. The mariner stepped forward, and in his eyes I saw depth, limitless and cold. My knees buckled. Behind me, the sea lion didn't move. It only watched. I don't know what gave me the strength, but I turned and fled. Through flooded halls and echoing stairwells I ran. Something inside me had refused, and in that moment of clarity, I escaped. I emerged onto the street before dawn, the air strangely dry and sharp in my lungs. I found a motel and locked the door behind me. Sleep came in choking bursts. My neck still throbbed. The gills eventually faded, leaving behind welts. But the dreams remained. The salt lingered on my skin. The sea had receded, but I knew it would return. When I returned to the apartment with the landlord, everything was dry. Bone dry. No damp, no salt, no sign of intrusion. But the air was still heavy, like the silence after something terrible has happened. The landlord said nothing, but his eyes darted. He felt it too. Now I sit in the motel, trying not to listen to the sound of pipes or the hush of water behind walls. The salt is still there, just at the corners of my lips. Sometimes, the gills twitch again, phantom slits beneath my skin. I still dream of glowing creatures, of great undulating shapes that move just beneath the floorboards. I don't know if the mariner was trying to take me or trying to show me the truth. I only know the sea remembers, and it is not finished with me. Scene: a disorienting road in the early hours of the morning. A driver, lost in a warped countryside, confronts a slow-blooming reality that no longer aligns with memory or logic. Action. Route numbers twist into nonsense, barns wear the wrong colors, and even the truck's dashboard clock freezes in defiance of time. Attempts to reach help only connect him with strangers. The farmland stretches bizarrely, the sky discolors with dawn, and even mechanical reliability betrays him. Brand labels scrambled, mirrors lying. As he drives in looping paths, residents respond with cryptic silence or evasive words. Every pass by the hay bales erodes the truth further. His belongings mutate, a watch altered, an ID mismatched. Fear tightens. Attempts to deviate only lead him back. Road signs dissolve into alien symbols. Memories turn traitor. Landmarks flicker between certainty and contradiction. Even his reflection in the mirror holds something unfamiliar. Monologue. I kept telling myself it was exhaustion, just exhaustion. But my breath came in ragged fragments, my pulse hammering like a trapped animal's. The voice in my head whispered I'd crossed a line I shouldn't have. Something unspoken, something unholy. I watched the world rearrange itself. Maps became useless, landscapes subtly wrong. My dashboard clock, stuck on 3:13 a.m., refused to move. When I reached for the radio, only a shifting hum answered. No voices, no music, no static. Just that maddening, rising and falling tone clawing at my thoughts. And when daylight finally came, it didn't bring comfort. It looked fake, too dim, too gray. The barn shadows stretched at odd angles, as if reality itself had started to sag. Panic clawed through me as the engine rattled. But even the tools I trusted turned foreign. The wrench slipping from my trembling fingers, the brands on my engine warped. I was unraveling. I must have driven for hours in circles. Sometimes I'd see a flicker in a window, someone watching. But they wouldn't help. They stared through me, speaking in riddles. When I asked about roads or maps, Their responses twisted my brain into knots. It was like I'd become a ghost in a story no one wanted to acknowledge. Then the hay bales came again. Always there. Always wrong. The objects in my truck began changing. My ID had the right face but not quite my face. The letters off. The dates wrong. I told myself, breathe. Just breathe. But I couldn't. It felt like I was being pushed. Like something unseen was ushering me deeper through layers of broken worlds. Each time I tried to turn away, I ended up right back where I started. The hay bales. Always reconfigured. Always waiting. The signs made no sense. The sky shimmered with a wrongness I couldn't describe. My memories? Unreliable. A blur. Did I pass a diner? A gas station? Was it left or right? My mind betrayed me. Even the rearview mirror held a darkness that didn't lift with the day. At one point I realized I was muttering things to myself. My name. My truck's color before the paint job. My favorite food. I squeezed the wheel so hard it hurt. It grounded me barely. Eventually I reached a rest stop. A payphone of all things. Ancient but real. I dialed dispatch from memory. A stranger answered, but at least they knew the company's name. I explained everything. They told me to wait, said help was coming. I nearly collapsed from relief. But time crawled. The rescue didn't come fast. Hours passed. And with them, that gnawing sense of being watched returned. Shadows flickered and vanished whenever I looked straight at them. Then a pickup truck rolled in. A tall figure stepped out. Said they were from the company, but their badge looked wrong. Slightly wrong. The font, the logo. My gut twisted. But I got in anyway. I had no choice. The silence in the truck was suffocating. The driver kept glancing sideways, as if trying to measure whether I belonged. We arrived at the barrier again. Hay bales impossibly arranged. Again. They said we had to push through one last time. My chest tightened. My palms were slick with sweat. But we moved the bales. Crossed over. Everything shimmered, warped. My ears popped. The ripple passed. Then the world settled, sort of. The depot came into view. Familiar, but not. The name on the building was just slightly off. My truck was already parked out front. As if I'd never left. Inside, the people greeted me with politeness, but their eyes were hollow. I asked about my boss. They looked puzzled. My phone buzzed. A message from dispatch, telling me to stay calm. But the name at the end wasn't anyone I knew. My reflection in the glass door showed someone who looked like me. But didn't. The angles were wrong. Too sharp. I'm writing this now in the cab of my truck. Every sound makes me flinch. I'm afraid the hay bales will appear again. Afraid that some hidden hand will push me further out. I can feel it, like something is watching, measuring me. The light outside is wrong again. I don't think I ever came back right. But I have to try. I have to keep driving, hoping to cross back into the world that feels real. Yet I fear it's gone. Maybe I lost it one crossing ago. Maybe I've been sliding between fractured mirrors ever since. Still, I grip the wheel. Turn the key. The engine hums. The road stretches forward into half-light. I keep moving. Not because I'm brave, but because I can't stand still. I dread what's ahead, but even more, I dread what I've become. Whatever waits beyond the next crossing, I'll face it. Because this limbo, this in-between world, is worse than any terror I might find.